Here he is, Geraint Thomas, national hero forever. Dual Olympic Games gold medalist, and now a winner of the Tour.
Hey everybody, Steve Schlanger, Christian Vande. This is In the Saddle, where of course we talk about all of the hot button, big topic items in the world of cycling, many of the things you're talking about on social media, at the water cooler, if anybody still talks at the water cooler anymore, I don't know. But this is what you're talking about in the world of cycling, so that's what we're doing here. And Christian, the Tour de France obviously is the biggest race in the sport, and preparation is so key to doing well there. What do you think is the best preparation for the Tour de France?
Preparation race, I would say, would be the Dauphiné. Dauphiné by a long shot. And especially if you look in the past winners who go on to win the Tour de France later, I would say that most times the winner comes out of the Dauphiné. Whether or not they win the Dauphiné and then win the Tour de France is another question. Of course, you have the other arguments of what else the things you do, but I think that's the first one I would say is the Dauphiné.
Geraint Thomas, who actually won the Tour de France after racing in the Dauphiné last year, is interesting, says that he actually prefers the Tour de Suisse because it's a week later and because he can essentially ride from the Tour de Suisse into the Tour de France and hold his form. There's not as much time in between.
Yeah.
And he likes it more.
No, I like the race better. I like Tour de Suisse better, believe me. But I think it's better, and I think all of his trainers will say the same thing, that it's better to have that big block of training yet again to go back up to altitude, work on the prep. And one of the bigger things in the Dauphiné is also that you're racing a few stages that are on the same roads as the Tour de France. And not only that, you get into that rhythm again of what those roads are like, what the road furniture is like, what the hotels are even like. All those kind of little things make you that much more accustomed to racing the Tour de France in July. And then you can even go back farther. Do you do the Giro? I mean, the best Tour de France that I ever had was on the heels of the Giro, and where I had a big training camp in June up at altitude. But I really think that Dauphiné, I think it can't really be beat.
Well, with regard to the Giro, isn't that too much stress? Isn't that too much to go through with just a few weeks in between that and the Tour?
Depends. If you're going for the win, of course, yeah. If you're going to go for the win like Nairo, if you're for like Chris Froome last year, yes, I think it's a little bit too much. But I think if you go for the win for, let's say you're going for the pink jersey for the first 10 or 12 days, and then go and sit back in the gruppetto and really just cherry pick a couple stages here and there and not really exert yourself to the maximum capacity, then I think it's good that you take this massive load, recover, maybe even lose some weight that you shed off through the spring months. I think that could actually be a good one too, but it's hard to say if you have a commodity like Chris Froome or Geraint Thomas. You can't just let them go to the Giro and just go and ride in the gruppetto or induce cherry pick stages and really take the chance that you might crash. Those are the kind of things that I'm starting to think of if I'm the GM. Really think of like we've seen a few times before. Crashes happen a lot of times in races. Okay, crashes happen in training as well, but it's a little bit more. It's a little bit better of an environment to have that in, whether it be in Tenerife or whatever altitude they tend to pick out.
What about that aspect of it that you just mentioned, minimizing risk and potentially not doing any races? I mean, guys these days, it seems like, can go off and train and have the science and other support from their own team if they get a couple of teammates with them. But they can train and almost get the same benefits to prepare for the Tour, right? No,
it's a great point, especially if you're Team Sky, where you have so much at your fingertips. I mean, those guys, what they have, especially in Tenerife, like we were just talking about, I mean, they have a mini little training camp there set up 365 days a year with scooters, everything they need, always there. So every team doesn't have that at their disposal. They don't have unlimited budgets like that. So you can't say that. You can say maybe for the top 3 teams, yes, that'd be great, and especially if you could bring teammates with you. But if you're going to do that by yourself, I've been there, man. It's not fun. I mean, it's just beating your head against the wall. It sucks. So, I mean, it depends on which team you are, what kind of rider you are, what your mentality is. Some guys like to race a little bit more. And then we could also talk about, we're talking about GC guys. We're not talking about sprinters. So if you're a sprinter, I really like the Geraint Thomas argument. You're coming out of the Tour de Suisse, you get the confidence going, you're really coming out there right on the heels of getting a good result in Tour de Suisse and going right into the Tour de France.
Well, that brings up the issue of timing, because a lot of people would say, okay, well, the Tour de Suisse is a week closer to the Tour de France, so you either have a less week to recover or you're riding with your form into the Tour de France. Others might say, well, you know what? I'm not trying to peak until the 3rd week of the Tour de France. So it doesn't really matter when the Tour starts. It's when it gets to the heart of that particular race. So I don't really necessarily need that amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, we could argue about this all day long.
That's the point.
Yeah, exactly. I know, I get it. But so the biggest thing now, I think that's a great argument for 10, 12 years ago, saying like third week of the Tour de France, so this is where you want to be sharp. But these are the kind of things that you really have to think about these days, is that you have to be sharp from day one. There's no like getting, wading into the Tour de France. Day one, if you're not ready for it, you're going to be 5 minutes behind by the time you even get to the mountain. So I think that argument's really dumb. But you raise a great point, though, in the fact that if you're thinking, let's say 3 weeks before the Tour de France, and then the last week of the Tour de France, that's over a month to try to hold that form. So if you're ripping, man, you might have to take some coals off. And really, if you want to be able to still crush people in the last week, where, let's be honest, is always the biggest differences are always made. So, no, you raise a great point, especially if you're thinking about winning or if you are winning the Dauphiné. But I'd rather be not chasing my tail. And I'd rather be having the win already in the bag, be able to take it back a little notch, ramp it back up, and hit a second peak in the Tour de France.
I mean, how long, as a professional cyclist, can you hold your top-end form? I mean, what's really the max?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you could actually say from person to person. I was able to keep my form for a decent amount of time, and I think a lot of these guys are holding their form pretty well, especially through diet is one of the biggest things I think that they've really honed in on, especially the nutrition. When you look at Team Sky, those are the kind of guys that I think that you really look at. They're setting the bar. And everything they're doing, I would emulate everything. I mean, especially if you're in a smaller team, you don't have the budget to really nitpick everything they've been doing. But I think that 4 to 6 weeks is the limit of what you could hold the really top-end form.
I do agree with you with regard to the Dauphiné.
Okay.
And one of the big reasons is the quality of the field. You always get so many guys who are also going to race at the Tour de France. So I think you get the double benefit when you're preparing. You not only get to race some of the stages of the Tour de France, but you get to see what your competitors are doing. You get to sort of take inventory and get a measuring stick as to where they are at this particular point. So you're not only preparing your own body, you're seeing what your competition is doing too.
No, I agree. I mean, but you can't really rest too much on the Dauphiné, like always. You could go and crush the Dauphiné. It really doesn't mean anything. The Tour de France is a different animal altogether, because then you get all those different people and all the stress. It's a completely different race altogether. But I think it's always the best way to challenge yourself. But really one of the biggest ones is underlying things, I think, is really just racing on that home soil for 8 days in a row and then going off and doing your own little training camp and coming back to the big show.
So we agree on the Dauphiné as the best prep. If you want another supporting item, we'll end with this. The Critérium du Dauphiné, and it says it right here, is the only race that has been won by all of the quintuple winners of the Tour de France.
Wow.
Did you know that?
No, but I didn't have my computer open. So
hit the power button.
Very good. Thank you, Google. Quintuple. All right.
Quintuple. You know what quintuple is?
Yeah, I got it now, now that I'm looking at it. I mean, all the way Bernardino, Chris Froome. And we have to start talking about Chris Froome already. I've already been thinking about this guy. Who's going to take him down? But I mean, that's for another show. But Chris Froome, he's one of the guys that really was setting that bar always in all those ASO races. And he's also keeping the ASO happy. AMGEN Sports Organization, those are the guys who run the Tour de France and also do Dauphiné. So,
all right.
There we go.
The Dauphiné it is.
Dauphiné.
The best prep for the Tour de France.